Hello, everybody. Welcome to the APPAM Academic Job Market webinar. I am Megan Grenda. I am the APPAM Membership and Administration Manager, and I'm joined today by Scott Allard at the Evans School at the University of Washington. He's professor and also APPAM treasurer. I'm also joined by Sarah Jane Brubaker at the Wilder School of Government and Public Affairs at Virginia Commonwealth University. Joe Cordes at the Trachtenberg School at George Washington, Susan Gooden, also at the Wilder School at Virginia Commonwealth University, and then my colleague Tristan Stout here at APPAM. I just want to alert everybody to the questions tab box on your screen. If anybody has any questions throughout the webinar, feel free to type your question there. We'll see it and then get to it as soon as possible. We're going to do questions at the end of each section and then also at the end. So feel free to type it in whenever, and we'll get to it either after each section or at the very end. And so to get started, I am going to turn it over to Scott.
Great, thank you. It's great to be here. We have a really great set of speakers today. And as was noted, we're all willing to take questions during the webinar and throughout. But also feel free to reach out to all of us afterwards. We're happy to be available to questions you might have. At the beginning, I also want to encourage you to share the webinar with your departments and programs and peers after the fact. I believe this will be up as a resource. And we hope online at the APPAM website. And we hope that this is a resource that's useful moving forward and has some kind of relevance beyond today. And also thinking not just about students who are on the market, but students who are even just starting out. It's really never too early to start thinking about how your work fits the job market and to do some things to prepare. Also, one other note, please keep an eye out for the APPAM Fall Conference Mentoring Program for doctoral students. It's something that we've been doing the last couple years. I think it's been a really successful initiative, and I think there'll be more information coming out in July. But that's a great way to network with people, particularly early on in your training or as you're approaching the dissertation or job search phase. So look out for that. And then before I turn it over to Joe, I just want to say a couple of things about what we're doing today. First, we're going to provide a broad overview of the academic job search. And we think it'll translate to lots of settings. But search processes at different schools are very different. Both by the type of position, the type of scholar that might be a focus. Open searches with open ranks can be very different. And so different searches will have different start and run times. So some searches will start right away in the fall. Others, particularly those that might be considering economists or open rank positions, will start later in the year and run later. So, it's important to understand kind of that timelines can vary and be different, and getting feedback from both your advisors, but also the people you're engaging on the search will be useful, so you can kind of put the timeline and items in perspective. It's also, we're talking about an academic job search. We think a lot of what we're going to talk about today is relevant to a non-academic job search as well, if you're thinking about kind of research positions in think tanks or with government. But feel free to ask questions around those particular searches too as they pop up. So with that, I'll turn it over to Joe.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Joe Cordes from the Trachtenberg School in Washington, D.C., and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about preparation. So next slide. There we go. Okay, so there are a couple of key things to keep in mind as you prepare for the job search. Obviously, first and foremost is the status of your dissertation. And how far along you are. Nowadays, I think most academic employers really, while they will interview people who are in the process of completing their PhD, they really do expect that the PhD be done by the end of that year. So, in other words, if you were going to enter the market in September, you really have to be pretty certain that you're going to be finished with the dissertation the following August. And your dissertation committee will obviously play a very important role throughout this process, and you should see them not only as mentors for your dissertation, but you should also see them as sources of advice about which kinds of positions might make the most sense for you, given your interests, things they know about different employers, and make sure to keep them apprised of developments in your search as they go along. Part of the search is obviously trying to identify job prospects, and there are several sources for doing that. One which is particularly relevant for people with PhDs in public policy and public administration is the website publicservicecareers.com. I think it's .com, actually. I should have put that instead of .org, or maybe .org. In any event, if you Google public service careers, you'll find it. And it provides a very wide list of jobs in public affairs, public service, and so forth. There's a special drop-down menu for sites or positions that require doctoral preparation, and I think it's pretty fair to say that all of the schools of public policy, public administration, and to some degree, perhaps departments of economics and political science may advertise positions there. Another excellent source are the listservs of the various professional organizations. NASPA, which is the main professional organization for schools of public administration, for example, has a listserv, and many employers will post their positions there, and then the listserv is sent out to potential applicants as well as other employers. Similarly, there's a listserv for the Association for Budgeting and Financial Management. I believe I don't know if there's a listserv for Arnova in the nonprofit sector, but in any event, you should check the various organizations and see what's available in that regard, because that can supplement the other sources. Word of mouth, of course, is important. So, you know, it's important to listen. People may know of your interest, and they'll pass along information to you. You may, by the way, pick up information even if it's in the midst of the process. If you attend some of the professional meetings that are ongoing in the fall, so for example, the APPAM meeting is in early November, and you may learn of positions there that you hadn't seen elsewhere, for example. And I think the same could be said for, again, the ABFM meetings for the financial management folks, certainly the meetings of Arnova for people doing nonprofit studies, probably the American Political Science Association meetings, which I think at the end of August, if I'm not mistaken. And once again, in the process of identifying job prospects, you know, make sure that you're in close contact with your advisor and your committee, because they also will have received information from their friends and colleagues at other places of possible openings and interest. Susan and Sarah Jane are going to focus a bit more on the next items, but just to go down sort of a list of things that you really need to have as you get started. The first thing you need to have is an up-to-date CV, and it should provide just enough information about you so that the employer gets an idea of who you are, but also it's a good idea to keep it relatively short. You'll need to develop a personal application statement. And once again, this is something I would strongly recommend that you do in consultation with your committee. You'll need to provide evidence of teaching experience. And then a very useful thing to do is to work with your committee to actually have a mock job talk that sort of simulates what a job talk is likely to be once you get on campus interviews. And with that, I will stop and turn it over to Susan.
Well, wait, Joe, I actually had a couple questions for you there before we move on to Susan. First, when you think about the timing of a practice talk, how do you encourage people to think about scheduling that, and when would you have students start to prepare for that?
Well, I mean, I would say certainly once they have sent out all of their applications is probably the earliest I would do it. What you want to do is you want to be sure that you do it enough in advance of possible interviews so that if, in fact, you get a lot of comments that suggest maybe you ought to change your presentation, you have an opportunity to do it once again. So I wouldn't do it right before an interview. I mean, I would plan for this. And I'd say the mark for me would probably be when, you know, once you've got your applications out.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. I don't think you need to wait till you know you're having an interview to do a practice talk.
Right.
And in fact, actually, I think one of the challenges students face often is waiting too late to do it. It might be hard to pull people together, and it may not be possible to make changes. So I think that's really good advice.
And
You know, one of the things I liked about what you said, Joe, is referencing the different conferences, not only their listservs, but I think as a student, the sooner you get engaged in conferences and in organizing panels, I think that helps you network, which not only allows you to kind of learn about positions in schools, but also kind of puts you at the top of the mind of people when they're doing searches. Your file will stand out a little bit. And I think, you know, to the extent that you're taking leadership roles and organizing panels or getting involved in conferences, you know, that doesn't just help you with the job search, that helps you find tenure and promotion letter writers down the road too. So I think conferences are a really great opportunity, and I really like how Joe kind of underscored, you know, professional associations and conferences as a place to do your job search, networking, and learning. You know, Susan, you have some thoughts about kind of the portfolios that students should put together as they begin their job search.
Yes, thank you so much, Scott, and welcome everyone. I'm Susan Gooden, a professor in the L. Douglas Waters School of Government and Public Affairs, and I wanted to share some information with you about compiling a good, an excellent portfolio, and so we've titled this Portfolio Must-Haves. A couple of comments before I go through some of the items on the list. One is to keep in mind that just about all searches, especially all positions for assistant professor positions, you're looking at easily 125 to 150, 160 applicants who are also submitting for that same position. So your portfolio is really a very, very important component of how you're able to introduce yourself. And the other thing I think to keep in mind is that when you are applying for jobs, the larger you can have your search, the better. I know oftentimes I will talk to students who say, well, I can only apply for jobs within a 2-hour radius or a 3-hour radius. And understanding that, you know, we have family obligations and responsibilities and all that, I would really encourage you to try to expand and apply to positions in as wide of a geographical range as you can, because of course that increases your likelihood or your probability of advancing in the search. But we can talk more about that if there are questions. So in terms of some portfolio essentials, certainly a customized cover letter and CV. If you don't take anything else away from this session, please take away that you don't want to have a one-size-fits-all portfolio. Your portfolio really does need to be customized to the place at which you're applying, and that starts with the cover letter. And you always want to make sure that the cover letter is focused on the position that you're applying for and how you are a fit for that position, how you're the best fit candidate for that position, as opposed to it just being a general cover letter and, you know, just sort of updating the name of the school in the first line and in the last line. To that end, also make sure that your cover letter is addressed to the right place. I think all of us have been in the experience where, you know, there's a reference to another school or another position in the cover letter. And so one thing you also want to think about is, if there are a number of positions out there, how many do you want to apply for, and how do you strategize your search so that you are really working smarter? So there may be 5 or 6 positions that you really feel are excellent fit. There may be another 8 or 10 that you think are marginal. You know, my advice would be to focus first and foremost on the ones that you think are the best fit for you, and to get your application packet in as soon as possible so that it can get full review and be there early. Likewise, your teaching philosophy and evidence of independent teaching. You'll want to have a statement to that effect so that it's clear that you have given some thought to your approach to teaching. Some of you may be involved in the National Future Faculty Program, which prepares faculty across all disciplines, and one of those requirements is to have a statement of teaching that I think is really important. And certainly you'll be needing to draw upon that during the phone interview or the on-campus interview. Evidence of independent teaching. So being able to share a syllabus from a course that you've independently taught, example assignments that you have developed, or assignments that you have graded. That's always great. If you haven't had an opportunity to have a complete independent teaching experience, perhaps you served as a TA for a course, did a section of a course, or even did guest lectures in a course, but be able to show some independent evidence of your teaching and various aspects of that beyond just the course syllabus. Also, evidence of scholarly potential. And here we're talking about, of course, publications. And I think there is a saying that says you can never publish too much, and that's true. And one of the things that all of us are seeing is that the number of publications that people have in hand when they are coming out on the market is, continues to increase each and every year. Especially for those of you who are early in the process, be thinking about publications along the way so that when you finish your dissertation, you not only have your dissertation, but you have your dissertation in 2 or 3 peer-reviewed publications or co-authored publications, book chapters, so that you can share and show evidence of your scholarly potential. Also, sponsored research is a plus. So if you've had a pre-doctoral fellowship, if you've been on a sponsored research project in which you had a very strong role, if you've been part of that process, also be able to share that. That's certainly icing on the cake. Strong reference letters. You want to make sure that all of your reference letters are coming in and being submitted on time, and that you track that, because you don't want your materials not being considered on a technicality. So make sure that those are coming in, and that all of the materials that are being submitted, both by you and by others, are being presented by strong writers who can really speak very persuasively to your candidacy. Throughout your package, you want to make sure that your package demonstrates a clear professional identity as a candidate. So it should be clear when the committee is looking at your packet that this is a person, for example, who does public budgeting with a focus on procurement in state and local government, or whatever your focus is. You want to make sure that identity comes through as a candidate, and that you share that. The other thing that I think is important to keep in mind, and I would do this within the customized cover letter, is speak to the classes at that institution that you can teach. So don't just include on your list electives. So maybe in your specialty area, you're interested in developing a course on this or covering an elective course on this. Keep in mind that they're looking for a faculty member who's going to be able to contribute to the teaching, research, and service mission of the program, of the department. And so part of that includes being able to identify specifically which courses at that institution are you prepared to teach. And you don't want to overclaim. You don't want to go in there and say, hey, I can teach every course that you have. But you should be able to quickly identify 2 or 3 core courses, because someone there, the program chair, somebody who's doing course scheduling, is looking to see, okay, what would this person be teaching for me in the fall that is a core course, that is a required course that we need to have covered. And so you want to make sure that all of that comes through, and that, again, it's really clear that you're not kind of a jack of all trades, but you do have a clear professional identity of which you launch your work, and in which you can tie to both elective courses and core courses. Conference presentations and networking. Joe and Scott have already talked about that, and I would just echo that. It is really, really important. APPAM, of course, is an outstanding conference. There are NASPA, ASPA, the American Society for Public Administration. There are a number of conferences that I would encourage you to get involved with. The conference presentation is certainly critically important, and you want to do well with that. The networking is also really important. You get a lot of leads sometimes on positions that are coming available. And I would say that certainly the lion's share of the jobs are being offered in the fall, so the fall conferences are really hot spots to go to. But then there's kind of this second bump in the spring, in which perhaps a program learns of a new line that they received, or a candidate, a faculty member who is leaving or has to go on leave or is going on sabbatical. And so there may be some really good one-year opportunities that come up if you weren't as successful in the fall, that come up in the spring, that you want to keep in mind and be on the market for as well. So you do want to take advantage of all that networking, those sessions that are available, and the advanced leads on jobs. And then finally, a bit about post-interview follow-up. So once you've gotten your great portfolio together, it's excellent, you've gone and done a great job talk, and you want to think about post-interview follow-up. One thing I would definitely encourage you not to do, I think the worst thing to do is, and I've actually seen this done, is where you give the thank you letter to the person on your way out the door. And so you might think, hey, I'm being really efficient here. I had already thought in advance. I had a list of everybody I was going to meet with, and so I gave them the thank you letter. You know, don't do that then. You do want to follow up with people that you've met with. Send a personal email just to let them know that you're interested, what you found attractive about your time there on campus, and briefly outlining what again you would be able to contribute sort of on day one. So you do want to do that post-interview follow-up. Sometimes it's good to wait a day or two so that again you can send sort of a thoughtful email, and again don't go with the sort of the one-size-fits-all variety. So there's a lot of work in terms of preparing for the interview and the written components, both on the front end with the portfolio and on the back end with the post-interview follow-up. I'll stop there and answer any brief questions or turn it over to my colleague Sarah Jane.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Susan. We have a few questions, and I open it up to the group, but Susan, I'll start with you first. We have some questions about how long your cover letter should be, how long your teaching philosophy statement should be, and how and where in your letter, how much time you should spend dedicating to your future research agenda.
So for your cover letter, I would aim for 2 to 3 pages, and of course that's going to be, single space, double space between paragraphs. I aim for 2 to 3 pages there, and you do want to cover sort of all elements of the position, introducing yourself as a candidate, but also sort of covering the teaching, research, and service areas, and sort of how what you bring to the table it fits with the position that's being advertised. So you want to make sure that you convey that you have an understanding, a clear understanding of the nature of the position, and use your cover letter to customize how you fit that across sort of all 3 dimensions.
Right.
So that's one question in terms of the length of the cover letter. In terms of the teaching philosophy and statement, again, you're typically looking at about 3 pages or so, single-spaced, outlining your teaching philosophy. And there you're thinking about what is your approach to teaching, what is your approach to your philosophy that sort of undergirds your approach, pedagogical approaches that you might use, approach and interactions with students. Those are excellent things to include. The other thing that I will encourage you to do, I know we have a short session here, but there are many resources that are available, but this one book I really recommend to a lot of students. It's called the Academic Job Search Handbook. It's by Vick and Forlong, and they really do an outstanding job of going through every element of the job search process, from looking at positions all the way to interviewing and negotiating an offer, and even sort of beginning your status as a tenure track professor. And so I would definitely encourage you to look at the Academic Job Search Handbook or other materials, and they draw upon a wide range of cover letters and CVs. They actually have a lot of great examples in there that you can draw upon, and it will provoke ideas as you are putting together your materials.
I think that's really helpful. I think one other place where you can talk about your future research agenda and plans is in your one-on-ones when you meet with people, when you go out to interview. And I imagine that might be covered by Sarah Jane here in a second. One other question, Susan, you mentioned that people often have an increasing number of publications these days. One of the webinar participants asked the average number, and maybe what is a good target number of publications to have as you think about the job market, knowing that there's probably not one hard and fast rule.
Sure. I would aim for about 3 to 4 coming out. Now keep in mind that doesn't mean that there are 4 peer-reviewed, sole-authored publications. I mean, if you can get that, that would be great. But it can be a combination of co-authored. You might have 2 peer-reviewed and 2 book chapters, or you may have 2 peer-reviewed, a book chapter, and a professional report. But aiming for about 3 to 4 publications. Because again, you want to show evidence. In your evidence, the strongest demonstration of your scholarly potential is actually your scholarly record. And so you want to work hard to build up that record so that the institution feels good in the investment that they're making, that this person is going to be a productive scholar, and they're not only buying future potential, but they're also looking at past performance.
Great. That's great. Sarah Jane, you're up to talk about the actual process of interviewing. Why don't you share us some tidbits and some insights into this kind of daunting exercise?
All right, thank you. I'm also at the Wilder School at VCU with Susan. I direct our PhD program in public policy and administration, and I also served as associate dean for almost 5 years and chaired many search committees, faculty search committees. So hopefully I can share some of the knowledge I got from those experiences. So I'm going to talk. I'm going to hit on 3 points in terms of faculty interviews. So the first one is thinking about your presentation. So the first thing I would say is to make sure you communicate with the search committee chair. I think Joe mentioned this briefly, and ask them how much time you have to give your talk, and make sure that you kind of fit your talk into that time frame, like you would at a conference, you know, to be aware of that. Also, ask if they have a preference regarding which study you should present. If you've worked on a couple of different studies, there might be one they're particularly interested in, given the nature of the position that you're applying for. And ask whether during the presentation the Q&A session is going to happen at the beginning or throughout the presentation or at the end, so you can kind of be prepared for that. And they may say that that's up to you, so kind of think about which you would prefer. So if it's up to you to choose what to present about, give some thought to this, talk to your committee chair, other faculty about that. Present your best research, present the research that's the best design, that has the most interesting findings, definitely something that's completed and not still in progress. And remember that they'll use, if this is a position where they're not asking you to give a guest lecture, they're going to use your presentation also as a way to assess your teaching ability. So how you engage the audience and your confidence level and how you present. So keep that in mind as well. Spend most of the time talking about your research methodology and the results and the implications, and kind of less time on the lit review. Again, they want to see what you have done as a researcher. Include in this a little bit of talk about your future research plans. Again, that will have been in your cover letter, but it's possible that everybody hasn't seen the cover letter. So spend a little time talking about your future research and kind of show how you have a research agenda to expand on what you're currently doing and your other interests. This is also a time where you can quickly identify the courses in the program that you've taught or would like to teach. So again, customize your presentation and specify the courses you'd like to teach. And again, to echo Joe's advice, please practice this talk multiple times before you go and do it as an interview. And ask people who come to the talk to try to give you hard questions so that you're prepared for that Q&A session. So the next part is what to expect during a campus interview. You're going to have a lot of informal interactions, so where people are driving you to and from the airport and hotel and campus. You'll have meals, you'll have city tours, campus tours. Keep in mind that in every second you're making an impression, so there's really no downtime or off time. Try to ensure that you're professional at all times. Anything that happens that you say or do during all of these interactions can go back to the committee, so just kind of be cognizant of that. You'll have meetings with various stakeholders, including faculty, students, administrators. So prepare questions about the program, about the position. Some things you might want to ask about are the P&T process, annual reviews, teaching course load, travel and research support, and this is where you can ask about the search timeline too, about how long they expect it to take, when they expect to make a decision, those kinds of things. You'll also give your research presentation. Depending on the job and the school, you may or may not be asked to give a guest lecture, to give some kind of teaching presentation. And then the other thing to keep in mind is that even though they hopefully will give you a schedule and an itinerary ahead of time, letting you know what you're going to be doing when and who you'll be meeting with, be prepared for the fact that that could change at the last minute. So be flexible and be ready to adapt to any changes that might happen. And then finally, what do faculty and deans look for in a candidate? In my experience, the main thing that people are looking for in the fields related to public policy is a strong researcher. So that's why the research presentation is really important. It's a time for you to demonstrate that you're well trained in research, particularly in quantitative methods, and that you're able to conduct quality research and present the findings knowledgeably and competently. You should also, we also look for people who are knowledgeable of their field and how their work makes a contribution to that field. I mean, ultimately, going up for promotion and tenure, that's what you need to demonstrate, is that you've made a clear contribution to the field. So you need to know that field and be able to talk about it. Also, a strong sense of yourself as a scholar, what Susan, I think, referred to as your professional identity. So not only are you showing this in your cover letter, but you're showing it on your campus visit and in your presentation as well. So know who you are, what you're interested in, what your research areas are, what your teaching areas are. We look for someone who's prepared, who again knows about our program and our school, knows our faculty and what they do, knows what our areas of specialization are, know what degrees we offer, at what level, and someone who can articulate why they want this position. Not just why you want any position, but why you want this position, why you want to be part of our team and part of our school. And finally, we look for somebody who can contribute to the mission of our school, both in terms of scholarship and in teaching, and someone whose research interests align with ours, and that align with our degree program. And we want someone who's collegial and professional. So again, keeping those things in mind when you're on campus and interacting are really important.
That's great. A lot of good advice here. One of the things that I think I see students do effectively when they're interviewing is they might start the talk with a slide about their interest, teaching and research interests that kind of nest whatever they're going to talk about, because it's often a very specific part of your dissertation or a very specific study. Nest that within a broader set of interests or expertise. That can be a useful tip. Sarah Jane, given your experience with searches, one of the participants here asked about the proper length of a job talk and how you should be thinking about how long to speak for, and also maybe thinking about how you engage Q&A at the beginning, during, at the end of your talk.
So I think that it might vary somewhat in terms of what the expectation is for the length, and so that's why it's really important to ask the committee chair, whoever's contacted you to invite you, to clarify how long should I talk for. And you definitely do want to leave time for Q&A. I mean, we've had people who come and talk for an hour and then there's no time for Q&A, and that's really putting you at a disadvantage because you don't get that opportunity to show what you know. And I was thinking too, a good tip for the Q&A is, you know, if you get a question, you need to respond to every question, and it's okay to say, you know what, that's a great question and I haven't really thought about it. You know, kind of be prepared for those questions that you're not quite sure how to answer. And also be thankful for the questions that you have. I mean, to say, you know, that's a great point, and, you know, I definitely want to, you know, write that down and take that back, and, you know, be really interested in what everybody has to say. So I would be prepared for that, and don't be thrown off if there's a question that you really can't answer. But this is where also practicing and making sure your faculty colleagues, your faculty members prepare you for the questions you might get asked. You know what kinds of questions might be coming your way.
Right. Let me just add something to that, and it's actually advice I give to students when they get ready to do their PhD defense, which is how to respond to a question that I don't want to say is hostile, but is sort of pointed. And what I tell them is, first of all, you're the one that's spent a lot of time researching your topic, and you really are the expert. So it's okay to defend your position, but you should also, you know, be quite open if there are limitations in the analysis and so forth, and acknowledging them. What you don't want to do is just say, oh, I guess you're right. I mean, that's not helpful. And, you know, but you kind of need to strike a balance, I think, between sort of being firm and upholding your results, but also becoming argumentative. And again, that's where practice will help.
I also think that when you're giving job talks, oftentimes you're doing it to cross-disciplinary audiences when you're interviewing for public policy jobs. And so economists may ask you about selection into your sample, even though you're doing a qualitative study and you're not, you know, trying to generalize to a larger population. But being able to anticipate the kinds of questions that economists might ask, or political scientists, or sociologists, or public management types, or whatever it is important. And so practice talks are important, but also making sure you're engaging with a variety of people around your work so that you can be responsive when someone says, well, you know, what's your identification strategy here? And you don't just look like a deer in the headlights, so to speak.
Right.
And one thing that I think will sort of helps with that as well, especially if you're interviewing for a program that's part of a larger school, oftentimes the audience will be not just faculty from that specific program, but also members from other disciplines within the school. So that's why it's really important, I think, as Sarah Jane mentioned, to make sure that you've researched the school well, because that gives you a sense of, is political science in the school, is sociology in the school, what are the other disciplines that are in the school, and that might at least allow you to narrow the field in terms of what other academic disciplines are likely to be attending your talk. And I would also say make sure that you don't make it too narrow to your field, that those who are attending from other disciplines, you know, it's too parochial. You want to think about striking a balance between showing that you are a field insider and you can talk the language of your field, but that you can also make your research accessible to a broader interdisciplinary audience.
Yeah.
And it's also quite, I mean, it's quite appropriate to ask the chair of the search committee, you know, what the composition of the audience is likely to be.
Yeah, these are all good tips. One of the things that often happens on interviews is you engage with students, doctoral students, master's students, undergraduate students. Sometimes schools will even ask you to teach an example of a seminar or a class session. Particular schools that have that prioritize teaching over research. To the panel here, we've got a number of questions about teaching experience. Some students or some participants here have asked about what to do when they don't have a lot of teaching experience in their doctoral program, either because they've prioritized research, or the schools prioritize research, or they've had RA positions over TA positions, or maybe they've taught in high school but not college level courses. How do you help our participants think about building their portfolio for teaching, but also helping them convey what they could do in the classroom if they haven't had a lot of direct teaching experience in the college or graduate level?
So a few thoughts on that. One, for those who are early on, try to really build that in. Even if it's not formally structured in your program, you may want to see if you can teach a course, say during the summer, at a community college or at another institution that is close by. So you do want to think about how you can build out that experience. Another way may be to think about it. Some of these conferences, sometimes they're looking for folks to lead workshops on a particular topic. So that might be an opportunity for, there may be a day-long workshop on, you know, some topic that is relevant, nonprofit management or something, and you're able to show that, demonstrate that you taught in that setting. So what you want to do is to be able to, if you don't have direct teaching experience, to be able to show other things that you have done that are similar, and how you would approach and how you would approach it. But again, I would really encourage you to, somewhere along the way, even if you're doing an RA position, or if there are just limited teaching opportunities, think about ways in which, because again, all of this advice is designed, remember, you're competing against 100 to 150 other applicants. So what you're trying to do is to be able to tick all of those boxes as strongly as you can.
You know, one thing I would just add to that is that, for example, if you are your experience and your funding comes from being a research assistant, I think many of the faculty will be quite sympathetic if at some point you say, would it be possible for one semester for me to swap out and, you know, be a TA or teach a class, because they'll recognize the importance of this experience, and I think you'll find that a number of them will be open to that. Again, planning probably helps. I mean, you know, this isn't going to be received all that well if they're right at the crux of a project that has an immediate deadline, but, you know, if they know that you're interested in academics and you'd like that opportunity, talk to them. And like Sarah Jane, I've also been a PhD director. Talk to the PhD director on that, because he or she is definitely going to want to be sure that their students go out on the market with as much experience as they can.
Yeah, I think when you're kind of grappling with your teaching experience, this is where your cover letter can provide narrative about the kind of teaching you've done, the responsibility you might have had as a TA. You weren't just kind of facilitating discussion of what the faculty member was doing, but actually bringing your own content in. If you've taught stats and found some really successful ways to teach stats, that would be something to emphasize. There's a lot of ways you can kind of take ownership over your teaching in your cover letter, and that's really a good place to do that. Sarah Jane, you have a PhD in sociology, right?
Yes.
Okay, so we've had a couple questions about students who are outside of public affairs, public management, public policy PhD programs, maybe in disciplinary homes, you know, in the social sciences or other places, and questions about how do you manage or navigate a public policy job search, given that maybe your advisor or committee are all sociologists or all statistics professors or something like that. Do you have advice and guidance to start us out with, and then we can open it up to the rest of the group?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, so, and I'm fairly new to the public policy field, actually, probably just like 5 years ago, kind of started getting involved, and our sociology department was no longer in the school, so I had to kind of learn about public policy. So I'm not an expert yet on public policy, but I would say definitely networking with public policy, faculty, students, associations. I mean, I've gotten more involved in APPAM just because I want to learn more about the field of public policy. Reading public policy journals, reading the kinds of things they publish, becoming more aware of how they address issues and some of the language and the terminology and the theoretical perspectives. I mean, there's a lot of overlap with sociology, but you know, it's called different things, you know, in public administration or in political science. So I think that, you know, if you're going to apply for a public policy position, I mean, you definitely can't fake that background. I mean, definitely sociology brings strengths to any field, I think. So you have to bring the strengths that you have from your background, from your training, but to be aware of how those overlap and connect with the other fields is going to be critical. I mean, I don't think you can fake it or pretend it. I think you really have to put some effort into knowing that larger field and kind of how your work fits into it. And the best way to do that is, again, reading the journals, networking with the people in the field, going to the conferences, seeing how they, you know, address the issues.
Others have thoughts on this question?
Yeah, just one other thing I would say is that sort of the good news is that I think a lot of public policy schools these days are broadening the scope of the type of people that they're looking for. I mean, sociologists, for example, are now increasingly being hired, as my impression, into sort of public policy and some public administration programs. That's also true for people in psychology, for example, which is another area that, you know, has been underrepresented. And in all of those cases, they do want you for your professional expertise and scholarship in your discipline. What they're looking for, I think, is somebody, as Sarah Jane has indicated, who is kind of willing to learn about the other side so they can figure out how to best contribute.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good advice. A couple other questions, and then maybe we'll wrap up with one great piece of advice that we each have for students on the market. One of the participants asked about co-authored publications and kind of how committees, search committees, weigh or think about those. Does anybody want to take a stab at that one?
I certainly think that co-authored publications are viewed generally favorably. You don't want all of your publications to be co-authored, so I think that's a big thing. But you know, one thing, if you're doing a co-authored publication, it does show that you can work as part of a team or you can work with others. So having a mixture of single-authored and co-authored. A couple of things with co-authored, again, you wouldn't want everything to be co-authored, and say you have 4 co-authored publications and you're 4th author on each, you know, that's not going to be very strong. So you want to do a mixture of those, and certainly be first author on as many as you practically can.
That's helpful. I think your cover letter is, again, a place where you can talk about your contributions to co-authored articles, whether you were lead author or not, and that's space to frame that. I think also, you know, if your dissertation is on a more specific topic, but you're really interested in broader issues in public policy or in public administration or management, that's also a place where your cover letter can say, you know, my dissertation's doing this, but I'm really thinking about expanding. And if you have a conference paper that you can point to, or some intentions or activity in that way, that can kind of broaden how people see you as a scholar. So, because we often know that dissertation chapters can be very specific pieces and maybe not the best representative of our broader intellectual selves. Let's see, I'm scrolling through. I think we've hit on a lot of the questions that we got that I think we have the time to answer. Who wants to start with the best piece of advice for our participants before we close up today?
I'm happy to start. I think the best piece of advice that I received was don't shy away from your real research interests. So I write a lot on social equity, race, and gender. And I know that in speaking to colleagues and other students, some folks will say that some of their advisors have said, you know, don't write on those topics because, you know, they may not be mainstream enough, or, you know, you may lock yourself out of the market. I completely disagree with that advice. I think it's really important to write on a topic and build your identity in an area that is of interest to you, and that these areas are in many ways, because of a lot of the pioneering work of those who have gone before us, are now largely, now they're not viewed as much as sort of fringe areas as they once were. But at the end of the day, you want to have a topic in an area that is going to motivate you to publish and to write and to do work. So, you know, whatever that topic is, stay true to your interest.
I will go next. While all of the parts of the job search process are important, if I had to pick one thing that can sink you, it's a bad job talk. And so it really is important that of all of the things we've mentioned here, you really put quite a bit of thought and preparation into what it is you're going to present, and really do take the opportunity to practice it before you go out, because you know, I'm sure we've all seen very many people coming in who are strong candidates on paper, and the job talk fizzles, and you know, they're not quite dead on arrival, but it's close.
Having given a couple bomb job talks, I concur with Joe's recommendations there. Not all as successful as I would want to be. Sarah Jane, how about a last thought from you?
I would just say limit the speculation and guesswork as much as possible, and get as much information as you can. So get information from the search committee about what they're looking for, all the things that I said to ask them, and get as much information from faculty, advice, guidance. Don't try to wing this. You know, there's a lot of information out there and a lot of good advice and guidance, and take advantage of all of that.
That's good. You know, some of the best advice I got was very practical, like, if you're wearing brown shoes, you should wear a brown belt, which, you know, to me was kind of like, aha. People also talked about, you know, making sure that when you're going to dinner, you know who you're having dinner with, so you can do a little bit more reading up about what they're doing, because your one-on-ones are often 15, 20 minutes, a half hour, and they'll be asking you a lot of questions, but dinner can go quite a bit. So knowing something about what the people you're having dinner with or lunch with and what they've done is what is important. I also have to admit, I brought a backup set of clothes on my interviews, and I can't tell you how awesome that was, because one time I spilled on myself at dinner and had in my sport coat, and so I had a backup. I had another example where someone dumped soup on me at the restaurant, and I had a backup pair of pants. So little practical tips here at APPAM will help get you down the road too. We will be posting this webinar, right, Megan, to the website.
We will be posting the recording along with the slides later this afternoon. You can find that on appam.org. And then also, I know we weren't able to get to everybody's question. I think we're pretty close though. But again, if there's any questions that were unanswered, all of our emails are on this last slide. So please feel free to shout out. And then one more thing, there was a question about the book that Susan mentioned. It's called the Academic Job Search Handbook, and it's by Julia Vick and Jennifer Furlong. So for anybody that missed that. But thank you, everybody, Scott, Joe, Sarah Jane, and Susan, and for all of our attendees. Again, if you have any questions, please let us know.
And good luck
on your searches.
Good luck,
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.